Sanji's Seed by B.J. Reinhard, illustrated by Shelley Hehenberger, and read by London Alouds. Long, long ago, when all lands were ruled by kings, Sanji lived with his mother in a poor mountain town. Every week on his way to the bazaar, Sanji stopped to peek between the bars of the great iron gates that guarded the king's palace. Sanji dreamed of becoming king. One morning, the gates were standing wide open. Sanji stepped inside. In the middle of the courtyard stood a row of boys. They wore silk pants, fancy shirts, and golden sandals. A feathered hat topped each boy's head. Sanji looked down at his own bare feet and tattered clothes. "Oh, I am like a weed in a rose garden," he thought. But Sanji was so curious about the king and his palace that he straightened his shoulders, smoothed his hair, and went to stand in line with the other boys. As he did, the king's messenger opened a scroll and began to read. The wise King Akbar has grown old. Because he has no sons or daughters, no brothers or sisters, no nieces or nephews, nor even any aunts or uncles. He wishes to train one of you to be king, but first you must pass the king's royal test. Each of you will be given a seed. Plant it and care for it. When the moon is full in the skies again, return to the palace with your seed. King Akbar will choose the one among you who is worthy to be king. 7 silver trumpets sounded. King Akbar marched into the courtyard, his bright robes flowing behind him. One by one, he dropped a seed into each boy's hand. When he came to Sanji, he stopped. With serious eyes, the king studied Sanji from the top of his head down to his dirty feet. Sanji held out his trembling hand. Without a word, King Akbar dropped a tiny seed into Sanji's palm. Sanji ran all the way home, squeezing the seed. "Mother, mother," he cried, bursting into their stone hut. "The king has grown old. He has no sons or daughters, no brothers or sisters, no nieces or nephews, nor even aunts or uncles, so he might choose me to become king. Look!" Sanji uncurled his fingers. There in his sweaty palm lay the tiny black seed. A seed? What good is one seed, my son? "Mother, think of it. This tiny seed is my chance to be crowned king. If I grow the biggest plant with the sweetest flowers, I will take you to live in the palace." So Sanji planted the delicate seed in a cracked clay cup. Every morning he watered it and set it in the window to be warmed by the sun. Every night he dreamed of becoming king. When the moon was half empty, Sanji said, 21 more days before I must return to the palace with my seed. Maybe today my seed will grow." That night, after gathering cow dung for fire, Sanji ran to see if the seed had sprouted. But it had not. When the moon was nowhere to be seen in the skies, Sanji said, 14 more days until I must return to the palace with my seed. Today is the day my seed will grow. That night, when he had finished weeding his mother's garden, Sanji ran to see if the seed had sprouted. But it had not. Days passed. When the moon was half full again, Sanji said, "Only 7 more days before I must return to the palace with my seed. Today must be the day that my seed will grow." That night, after he hurried home with water from the well, Sanji ran to see if the seed had sprouted, but it had not. "Mother," he said, "what if the king becomes angry or laughs at me? Each night the moon rises bigger and brighter. Soon I must return to the palace with my seed, but it refuses to grow. Rest, my Sanji, his mother answered. You have done all that you can. But there must be more that I can do. So Sanji sang to his seed. That night, after picking apricots, Sanji ran to see if the seed had sprouted, but it had not. The next morning, Sanji set the clay cup on a tree stump. Slowly, humming with the birds and swaying with the breeze, Sanji danced for his seed. That night, after washing clothes in the river, Sanji ran to see if the seed had sprouted, but it had not. As soon as the first light of the sun touched the skies, Sanji carried his seed into the woods. "Tiny black seed," he said, shaking his finger at the cup of dirt. "You are being stubborn. I watered you and I gave you light. I sang for you. I danced for you. I prayed for you. You must grow now so that I can become king." That night, before Sanji finished milking his goat, he ran to see if the seed had sprouted. But still, it had not. "Mother," he cried, "this is worse than falling into a pit of snakes. The whole kingdom will laugh at me. Tonight the moon will rise as a great pearl in the skies. Tomorrow I must return to the palace. I can't go before the king with a cup of dirt." "Rest, my son," his mother answered. "Even if the whole world laughs, I am very proud of you. You have done your best. Perhaps you were not meant to be the king." That night, Sanji tossed and turned in his bed. The silver light of the moon shone in his face. "Why did I ever dream of becoming king?" he sighed. The next morning, Sanji did not hurry to the king's palace. By the time he arrived at the great iron gates, the other boys had already lined up in the courtyard. They held large pots with shiny plants and sweet flowers. Soon, word spread down the row that Sanji had no plant. "Fool," whispered one boy. "You do not belong here," scoffed another. They all began to laugh. Sanji hung his head in shame. The king's messenger stepped forward. "Let the royal test begin." One by one, King Akbar picked up every pot. He sniffed each flower. He spoke with every boy. When the king came to Sanji, he did not pick up the empty cup. He turned and walked to the middle of the courtyard. "Young men of my kingdom," said King Akbar, "you have strong, healthy plants." Then he began to laugh. He laughed until he held his sides and wiped tears from his eyes. "But your plants are not from the seeds I gave you. I boiled my seeds in oil, then dried them in the sun. There was no life in them. Those seeds could never grow." King Akbar's solemn gaze met Sanji's. "Step forward," he commanded. "Your cup of dirt tells me that you are the only one brave enough to do what is right before God, no matter what the cost. I will train you to be the new king." Sanji's heart soared. Servants bowed before him. They draped bright robes over his shoulders. That same day, he brought his mother to live with him at the palace. And from that time on, Sanji looked out from the royal side of the great iron gates, where all the days of his life he was known as a kind and honest king. My friends, I hope you enjoyed Sanji's Seed, read by London Read Alouds. Don't forget to like and subscribe.